The snow fell in silence that night, thick and relentless, turning the world into something unrecognizable. He didn't know yet that the small shape beneath the street lamp would change everything. He didn't know that one decision made in seconds would unravel the careful distance he'd kept between wild things and the warmth of home. He only knew he couldn't leave it there. The cold snap had arrived without warning, the kind that makes metal burn to touch and breath freeze in your lungs. He was walking home from work, head down against the wind, thinking only of the warmth waiting inside. But then the street lamp caught something. A small figure, motionless, pressed against the base of a chain-link fence where snow had drifted deep. At first he thought it was a stray kitten. The city had plenty of them, and winter was always cruel to the ones left behind. He moved closer, boots crunching through ice, and knelt down. That's when he saw the markings. Tufted ears, still and frost-covered. A spotted coat, gray and brown, dusted with snow. Paws far too large for any domestic cat, with claws visible even in the dim light. The realization came slowly, then all at once, settling into his chest with the weight of something impossible. A bobcat kitten, barely alive. He didn't think, didn't hesitate. He pulled off his coat and wrapped the tiny body inside, feeling the faint tremble of breath against his hands. The kitten didn't move, didn't fight. It was too far gone for that. He pressed it against his chest and ran through the wind, coat flapping open behind him, cold biting through his shirt. Nothing mattered except getting inside, getting it warm. The house felt like a furnace when he burst through the door. He moved on instinct. Heating pads from the closet, towels fresh from the dryer, a shallow box lined with fleece. He laid the bobcat down gently and started working. Slow thawing. That was the rule. Too fast and the shock could kill it. He pressed warm towels against the frozen paws, checked the shallow rise and fall of its chest, watched for any sign of response. Nothing, just breathing, faint, fragile, but there. The hours passed in silence. He worked carefully, methodically, replacing towels as they cooled, adjusting the heating pad, tilting the kitten's head to clear ice from its nose and mouth. The bobcat's eyes stayed closed, frozen shut beneath a thin layer of frost. He used a damp cloth to melt it away, revealing lids that didn't flutter, didn't open. But the breathing continued, steady, stubborn. Somewhere past midnight, exhaustion caught up with him. He sat back against the wall, staring at the small wild thing curled in the box, and told himself what he needed to hear. Just one night, that's all. Then a rescue center will take over. It felt true when he said it. Safe, responsible, the right thing to do. He almost believed it. That's when Milo appeared. The orange tabby stood in the hallway, backlit by the kitchen light, yellow eyes fixed on the box. Milo had been part of the house for 6 years, a rescue himself, once feral, now comfortable in the routines of indoor life. He wasn't skittish, but he also wasn't bold. He observed before he acted, kept his distance from anything unfamiliar. But tonight, he didn't keep his distance. Milo moved forward slowly, paws silent on the hardwood floor. He stopped at the edge of the box, nose twitching as he took in the scent. The man watched, ready to intervene, ready to pull Milo back before fear or instinct took over. The smell alone should have been enough. Wild musk, predator scent, something that didn't belong in a house with food bowls and soft beds. But Milo didn't hiss. He didn't arch his back or flatten his ears. He just studied the bobcat kitten, with a focus that felt deliberate, careful, like he was making a decision the man couldn't see. And then, without warning, Milo lowered his head and began grooming the bobcat's frozen ears. The man froze. Milo's tongue moved in long, purposeful strokes, the kind of grooming that went beyond cleaning. It was the language of bonding, of claiming, of family. The bobcat didn't respond, couldn't respond, but Milo didn't seem to care. He worked patiently, carefully, warming the icy fur with the heat of his breath, the roughness of his tongue. And then, as if it was the most natural thing in the world, Milo curled his body around the bobcat kitten and began to purr. The sound filled the quiet room, deep, steady, protective. The man sat in stunned silence, hand halfway to the towel he'd been reaching for, unable to move, unable to look away. He'd seen cats bond before, seen Milo tolerate strays through the window, seen him share space with other animals at a distance. But this was different. This wasn't tolerance. This was adoption, immediate, unquestioning, complete. The bobcat's breathing deepened. Milo's purr continued, a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the box, through the floor, through the strange, impossible moment unfolding in the middle of the night. And the man realized with a clarity that felt like cold water that he didn't understand what he was witnessing, couldn't explain it, couldn't predict what would come next. Why would a domestic cat, a creature shaped by safety, routine and trust, instantly adopt a wild predator that should have terrified him? He didn't have an answer. But as the wind howled outside, and the heating pad hummed softly beneath them, he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just one night anymore. Morning light came pale and cold through the windows. He woke on the floor, neck stiff, still wearing yesterday's clothes. For a moment, he'd forgotten. Then he saw them. Milo was curled tight around the bobcat, body wrapped like a living blanket, warmth radiating between them. The bobcat's chest rose and fell with strength that hadn't been there the night before. Its tiny paws twitched in sleep, stretching against Milo's belly. The orange tabby's eyes opened slowly, met the man's gaze, and closed again, calm, content, unmoved by the impossibility of what he was doing. The man reached for his phone to call the wildlife center. He didn't dial. The days that followed felt like watching something that shouldn't exist. Milo didn't just tolerate the bobcat. He became its guardian, completely, unquestionably. When the kitten cried, Milo appeared instantly, meowing back in soft, reassuring tones. When it slept, Milo curled around it, purring until the trembling stopped. He brought his favorite toys to the box, a worn mouse, a crinkled ball, and laid them carefully beside the bobcat's head. The man tried to separate them once, for safety, for reason, for all the logical explanations that said a house cat and a wild predator shouldn't share the same space. Milo found his way back within minutes. By the end of the first week, the bobcat was eating solid food, small pieces of chicken at first, then more, eyes brightening with each meal. It chewed on furniture legs, testing new teeth, learned to walk without wobbling, legs growing steadier each day. And Milo was there for all of it, teaching through example, head bumps as greeting, slow blinks for trust, gentle paw taps during play. But the wild remained. The bobcat pounced with a precision no house cat could match, climbed curtains in seconds, claws finding purchase where Milo wouldn't dare. Its eyes tracked movement with a focus that belonged to forests, not living rooms. Yet every evening, it curled against Milo's side, purring in a rhythm that matched the tabby's own. The man watched from the doorway one night, coffee growing cold in his hands, and felt something shift inside his chest. This wasn't temporary anymore. He told himself it was rescue, emergency care, a brief interruption before professionals took over and wild things returned to wild places. But Milo hadn't read that script, and the bobcat, growing stronger each day beneath the warmth of an unexpected bond, seemed to have written its own. Something unusual was unfolding in his home, something beautiful, something he didn't know how to name, but couldn't bring himself to end. The bobcat grew quickly, too quickly. Within weeks its paws stretched wider, legs lengthened into muscle and sinew. The soft kitten body hardened into something lean and powerful. Play fighting with Milo became something different, more intense, more physical. The bobcat would pounce with force that sent Milo tumbling, pin him down with strength that made the man's breath catch. But Milo never flinched, never hissed. He'd roll free, tap the bobcat's nose with a gentle paw, and the dance would continue. Trust, unbroken, but the man saw what Milo couldn't. He saw the bobcat stalk shadows across the floor with a hunter's focus, saw it scale bookcases in single leaps, saw the way its ears swiveled toward sounds outside, birds, wind, distant sirens, with a longing that looked like memory, or maybe instinct calling it towards something it had never known. He made the call he'd been avoiding. The wildlife rehab center was kind but direct. The bobcat was healthy, strong, ready for transitioning back to the wild. They could guide the process, supervise the release, ensure it had the best chance at survival. It was the right thing to do, the responsible thing, but it meant breaking the bond. And that bond wasn't just the bobcat's anymore. It was Milo's. The man watched his cat follow the bobcat from room to room, watched him curl close during naps, watched the way Milo's eyes tracked every movement like he couldn't bear to look away. This wasn't companionship. This was something deeper, something Milo seemed to need in ways the man didn't fully understand. He built the enclosure anyway. Large, secure, a transitional space in the backyard with climbing platforms and hiding spots. The bobcat explored it fearlessly, leaping between levels, stalking insects through the grass, nose lifted to catch scents the man couldn't name. It looked right, natural, like this was what it was meant to do. But every evening as the sun dropped low, the bobcat would press against the glass door, watching, waiting, looking for Milo inside. And Milo would be there, paw pressed to the glass from the other side. The man stood between them, heart pulled in two directions, and asked himself the question that had no easy answer. Was returning the bobcat to the wild the right thing to do, even if it broke both their hearts? The stronger the bobcat became, the more capable, the more wild, the harder the decision felt. Because letting go wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about love. And love, he was learning, doesn't follow the rules we think it should. Spring arrived with green that felt too bright, air too warm, birdsong too loud. The bobcat was powerful now, confident, undeniably wild. Its coat had thickened, muscles rippled beneath spotted fur, and its eyes held a sharpness that belonged to forests, not homes. The wildlife staff arrived at dawn. The man and Milo walked the enclosure one last time. The bobcat approached slowly, nuzzled against Milo's face, then pressed its forehead to the man's palm. A moment, a breath, and then it turned, following the staff toward the open forest at the property's edge, toward the world it was meant to inherit. It didn't look back. The silence in the house felt wrong. Milo wandered the rooms crying softly, small broken sounds that echoed through empty spaces. And he sat by the glass door for hours, paw pressed to the spot where the bobcat used to wait. Stopped eating, stopped playing. The man tried everything, new toys, extra attention, open windows so Milo could hear the forest. Nothing worked. He started to wonder if he'd made a mistake, if love should have mattered more than instinct, if keeping them together would have been the kinder choice. Weeks passed. Then one morning, he checked the trail camera he'd mounted at the tree line. There, on the edge of the woods, stood the bobcat, bigger now, healthier than he'd ever seen it, coat gleaming in dappled sunlight, body poised with the easy confidence of something that had found its place in the world. But it wasn't hunting, wasn't moving. It was just watching, looking toward the house with an expression he couldn't quite name. And then he heard it on the audio. Two soft meows, quiet, deliberate, responding to something the camera had picked up seconds earlier. Milo's cries from the porch. His hands shook as he opened the door. Milo walked outside slowly, ears forward. The bobcat stepped closer, moving through the grass with a grace that belonged to wild things, but stopped just short of the porch. Close enough, not too close, the boundary respected, the distance honored, but close enough for Milo to reach forward and touch noses. They stood like that for a heartbeat. 2, 3. Then the bobcat turned and slipped back into the trees, disappearing into shadows and green. Milo sat on the porch for a long time, purring. The man realized then what he should have known all along. The bobcat had stayed only one night in the snow, but the bond they'd formed, that would last a lifetime.